were a Milwaukee County supervisor, you pushed pretty hard for a sales tax increase.
Yep.
That would be dedicated to parks, transit, and other things.
Yeah.
Are you still supportive of that?
Yes, very much so. And the reason...
And that would be how much of an increase?
So when we passed the referendum, when the public passed the referendum, over 200,000 people voted for it.
52-48.
Right. But, you know, I remember I was brand new on the county board at the time, and everyone said, don't push a sales tax, no one's going to vote for that, don't you know this town? And I said, no, I think if you explain what it's going to go for, people will go for it. And they did, right, and it passed. And it was for parks, transit, emergency medical services, and property tax reduction.
Right.
And unfortunately, it was only advisory because the Milwaukee County doesn't have the authority to do it on its own. So we had to go to the state. The state started to. I mean, I don't know if you want to go over the whole history of it. I remember it.
You don't have to do that. But
yeah.
The sales tax is considered a regressive tax by many people. You're a liberal Democrat. Mm-hmm. How do you fit that together, justifying an increase in the sales tax?
I remember thinking that exact same thing when this thing came up, of thinking this is regressive because it's going to impact people who are lower income. That's true nationally, but in Wisconsin specifically, it's not as true. And the reason is because if you look at people who are struggling in poverty or at the poverty line and where they spend their money, most of what they spend it on is not subject to a sales tax. So think about it. If you are in poverty, you spend your money on rent. That's not subject to a sales tax. You spend it on transportation, on gasoline. That already has an index tax in it. It doesn't get hit by additional sales tax. You have groceries. That's not subject to a sales tax. And you also have medication, medicine, and services. None of those are subject to a sales tax. And if you add all those things up, that makes up a majority of what people who are struggling are paying for. And on the opposite side, there's this piece that 1/3 of the funds that come in from sales tax, the money generated, comes from outside of the county, right? So people coming in are helping to pay for this. And then the third piece that convinced me was those are the same people who stand to benefit the most, right? Is people who are going to suddenly have a quality park in their neighborhood where they might not have one now. People are going to find it that much easier to connect to jobs once we can expand transit routes and look at lowering fares so they can do it more affordably.
So it would be you would like to see a sales tax very similar to the one that you had the advisory referendum on.
Correct.
And you would do that how quickly?
So we would have to go to the state for enabling legislation, and I have my note that says that Republicans are in charge of the Capitol from you earlier. But here's the thing. The other counties across the state, they are starved for revenue as well, for whether it's they want to build roads or whether they want to provide different services, and they've tapped the sales tax that was available to them. And I think the number is now 60 of 72 counties have tapped into that. And so what I would work for is working with other counties to say, give us this referendum authority, and we'll go out there and we'll sell it to the public again.
Okay. And talking about taxes still, Chris Abele has made it an emphasis that he has not increased the property tax during his 5 years. The county board has increased it. He's then worked off of that. Would you have a similar policy to him where you would not increase the property taxes?
Whose policy does that sound really similar to, Dan?
It sounds a little bit like Scott Walker's policy.
Right. Yeah.
So do you want to follow Scott Walker's policy
No.
on property taxes?
No, and I get it's a show that I think is worn out, right? It's run its series and it's due for cancellation, right? This idea that the county executive goes up there and says, we haven't raised property taxes with the big asterisk that says from the year prior of whatever the county board raised it to. Right. And then we go through this whole routine where the county raises it a little bit, the county exec condemns them, and then they use it the next year.
So what's the new episode? What's the new TV show if you win?
Thanks for extending the analogy. I'd say the new one is actually let's have an honest conversation about where our taxes are and what we're going to spend them on, and also about where our services are, where our quality of life is. But just going out there and pretending that property taxes aren't going up by saying we're going to beat up on the county board for raising it while embracing the taxes that they increase, it's worn thin. And the fact is, and maybe you don't know this, but as Abele is talking about how he hasn't raised property taxes, the fact is property taxes as a percentage have gone up higher at the county than they have at the city of Milwaukee under Tom Barrett.
Your answer is probably going to make some people nervous because it's not a hard and fast rule. You said you're going to just see how things are and then we'll determine. So how can we trust you not to come in as a tax and spend liberal and start pushing up the property taxes right away?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've lived here my whole life. I'm a homeowner. And we're going to have to make sure we're having an honest conversation about where it's going. We'll be out there in the public and see what people are comfortable with. You know, my bottom line is to keep it as close to inflation as possible moving forward. My big goal is to try and make sure we're switching to additional revenue streams like the sales tax. Milwaukee County has among the lowest sales taxes in the entire country. So trying to shift that while lowering property taxes is going to be my goal. But in the meantime, dealing with the tools that we have, trying to keep it as close to inflation as possible is my goal.